Good morning, members. I call Committee of Whole on Bill 42, the Provincial Sales Tax Amendment Act 2022 to order. Shall Clause 1 pass? Member from Kamloops North, Thompson.
Thank you. Given the way the sections are, I'll have quite a few questions in the front end sections likely. And so I guess first off, just so we can get a better understanding of the development of this bill, I'm hoping the minister would be able to provide us with a timeline of when the bill was first being discussed, and including of representative dates around when it would have gone to Cabinet and when it would have ultimately had Cabinet agree that this bill should move forward to the Legislative Assembly.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do want to introduce a number of staff who are here to help us through this committee stage. I've got Doug Foster on my left, and behind me I've got Steve Hawkshaw and Brian Murata, who have worked diligently on this. To answer the member's question, we'd all been hearing about the opportunity for Vancouver to be a host city for FIFA, and when the City of Vancouver put themselves forward, we started exploring with them at their request, ways to help them fund this opportunity. And it really wasn't until it was awarded in June that we, in earnest, began to explore this opportunity to help them with the costs. And it was at their asking that we accelerated the conversation so that we could have the legislation that's before us that would help pay for the significant costs that come with hosting such an event.
Member.
Thank you, and obviously there's cabinet confidentialities involved, so I'm not asking with this next question for the minister to convey any of what was discussed and the thoughts of cabinet in general, or the vote, or anything. It's obviously was approved by cabinet to come forward in this form, and that's fine. What was the date that cabinet had that discussion and decided that this bill met the threshold and the test to be brought forward?
Minister.
Thank you very much. I want to let the member know that cabinet agendas are also part of cabinet confidentiality. What I can share with the member is that, when we had some preliminary conversations as Vancouver put itself forward to be a host, to be a potential host city for FIFA. And so there were preliminary conversations, and it really was when they were awarded, I believe it was June, that conversations began in earnest and activity started to really take place to deliver this for the City of Vancouver, so that we have this opportunity to raise the resources necessary to deliver on a commitment to host a number of FIFA games that I know everybody's really excited about. And so the work began in earnest this last summer and through there until we're here at committee stage of this bill.
Member.
Thank you. And so this feels a little like deja vu. I've asked similar questions on a previous bill, and eventually the minister did provide a date. So maybe try this a different way then. Could the minister please let us know what date the bill as it stands in front of us was finished being drafted and signed off by the minister?
Minister.
Thank you very much. The bill got signed off in October.
Member.
Thank you. So again, it was introduced October 31st. Could we have a little more specifics as to when it was? There's, there's accuracy that's, I think, important as we move through this bill. And so, was it October 30th? Was it October 3rd? What was the timeline?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We had to do a little bit of digging. I wasn't prepared to provide specific dates about sign-offs, but we were able to track it down. October 25th is when it got final sign-off.
Member.
Thank you. The reason I'm asking these questions is because it leads into my next question then. So, our preliminary discussion with Indigenous leaders that we're dealing with the Olympic bid, the proposed Olympic bid, was that this was on their radar screen, but they never actually had the province bring this up as a potential funding source for the 2030 Olympic bid. The reason that's important is this was drafted now and ready to go on October 25th. It was actually October 27th that the government said they would not be partnering in with the Olympic bid, with the Indigenous groups. And it was partly due to financial risk and financial exposure was the reason given, yet a very major funding source was never actually apparently discussed or calculated into those decisions. So was the prospect of Bill 42 taken into the calculation and the risk assessment by the government then when they said no to the Indigenous communities around their Olympic bid?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I think it's important to get on the record that these are two completely separate things that we're talking about. The member is pulling them together, and they are very distinct. So our assessment of the 2030 bid is that the member's referring to. We could see no clear business case for the province that would make it a viable games. I think if we're going to host anything, you want to make sure that it's successful. And that was very important, I think, to us to make sure that if we were to do that, that it would be successful. But I also want to remind the member that we're already hosting FIFA, and this tool helps pay for the cost of FIFA over a number of years. And we'll be certainly having conversations with the City of Vancouver about over how many years do we need to have the MRDT in place in order to generate the revenue needed to successfully host the FIFA games. You can't do another MRDT on top of this special event's MRDT for yet another games a couple of years later, because there wasn't the capacity to do that. And so while this legislation was being undertaken specifically for FIFA, it can be used for other opportunities, and that's why we've written the legislation the way we have, that should there be another opportunity for Vancouver or other municipalities to do a global event that has benefit for the entire province in some significant way, that there's a tool for them to use. But the room for of this new tool was already taken up by FIFA. And as well, there's an Invictus Games coming along as well. And now I understand there's a Grey Cup, because that was also in the mix. So there's lots of events that are happening. And the capacity for also doing a successful Olympic bid just wasn't in the cards for the timing that it was requested.
Member.
Thank you. The minister mentions Grey Cup, and I'll get to the confusion this bill has created later with the only reference to international event buried in the very back page. But so that actually wouldn't qualify based on the minister's legislation. But again, did the ministry, did the government then not run any potential revenue numbers on what a bill like this would mean in relation to a 2030 Olympic bid? In other words, the minister has said that there was no viable financial path for the Olympic bid, yet we're dealing with a piece of legislation that was very clearly known by government ahead of the no given to the Indigenous-led Olympic bid. Was there any calculations done at all? Was there any revenue projection modeling done on what this bill could mean to an Olympic bid moving forward?
Minister.
Very much, Madam Chair. So the member needs to recognize that the scope and scale of these two different events are like night and day. So the analysis that we have for FIFA is between around $240 to $260, $270 million. Half of that is Vancouver's cost. And this tool can help them with their cost. Our very, very preliminary analysis, and this is very preliminary, it's over $2 billion to host the Olympics. And so the scope and the scale are like, I'll say Mutt and Jeff, are like they're just the contrast between what is needed in order to host a successful Olympic Games is way beyond anything that an MRDT like this could possibly deliver.
Member.
Thank you. Well, again, in the minister in her answer there recognizes that even this is not intended to pay for the full cost of the FIFA event. And I recognize that. And I'm not asking if this was modeled to see if it would pay for the full cost of the Olympics. But it's a revenue source. And the question was around modeling it to see if there was a revenue source that could help offset some of the risk. And frankly, the answers to this point from the minister have shown a very clear willingness to work with Vancouver on the FIFA bid, and that's understandable, but a lack of recognition of the rest of the province. And these international events are supposed to be province-wide benefit. Now, my riding actually would have had Olympic events at it. It would have had Sun Peaks, would have had Kamloops. They could have been a designated area. Whistler could have been a designated area. They would have had Olympic events. Depending what happens with this and Vancouver and the municipalities around, whether or not Richmond agreed to go into this or Richmond agrees to go in with an Olympic bid or not, would have played a part. There's a lot of hotels in Richmond. In fact, the airport's in Richmond. There's the training opportunities. You could have made a case for municipalities to stick their hand up and say, I would like to be a part of it. In 2010, Kamloops hosted training. Lots of cities hosted training. Sun Peaks hosted training. Kelowna hosted training events. Those cities could have made a case for having to be part of this as a province-wide designated area to help host the Olympics. So I guess the question to the minister is, why would the government not have looked at this through a lens like that to see if there was some way to help offset some of the economic risk if that was the sole reason for saying no to an Olympic bid?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And again, you know, a lot of considerations were looked at as part of the desire to of the four nations, to host an Olympic bid. And we looked at the whole cost. That is very significant. More than $2 billion is what it cost. More than that. And again, high level, very high level ballpark. And so we expect it would be more than $2 billion would be the final cost of hosting an Olympics. We were already committed to FIFA. So that decision had already come to pass. It was already awarded to us. And we have an obligation to follow through and to make sure that we could deliver a successful FIFA experience. And in talking with the minister responsible for tourism, there's lots of interest in hosting community events all around the FIFA opportunity so that the members riding in Kamloops can have their own sort of party and gathering. In fact, I would say that today I saw that the mayor of Port Coquitlam is hosting a whole bunch of FIFA watching parties in his community. And so already getting into the spirit of FIFA. So there will be certainly lots of opportunity for the province, right across the province, for communities to get involved as we host this international event. The other thing that the member, I don't know if he's not recognizing it or I don't what part isn't clear, is that by having this tool, this additional MRDT, the room for the MRDT over the next number of years will be taken up by FIFA because it has to generate revenue to help cover the cost. And so we can't build on top of that some more MRDT for another event because FIFA's in 2026. So it's like the space for that is being taken up. That doesn't preclude, and again, the way we've written this bill is that there's opportunity to do this again, should there be a significant event that is wanting to be hosted by whoever in this province, that there's a tool available for communities to use, because we recognize that there are communities that want to be host to international events, and we want to work with them to help them participate in that.
Member.
Thank you. Well, again, I fully understand that there can't be a layering. However, it was the minister that mentioned Grey Cup, which actually doesn't qualify for this bill whatsoever. The minister also referenced the Invictus Games, which would not qualify for this because of a stacking of events, given the time frame that the Invictus Games are at, and the location. So, again, my question, though, is really around and again, this is actually to do with Section 1, Madam Chair, because it's about designated major event accommodation areas and the definitions. So I fully understand that FIFA, but unless there's another 60,000 seat stadium, and given the Surrey election results, I don't think that's going to happen between now and 2030. In British Columbia, I'm unaware of. There's only one stadium that FIFA will be played at in British Columbia. That's in Vancouver. So that's totally understandable. I'm not taking away from Vancouver making this request, looking to cover the cost with this request. I understand that. But that's one designated area. The Olympics would have been in multiple designated areas that could have been defined throughout this province, because it's an event that was going to be in multiple municipalities. So is the minister saying by her answer a couple times now that this wouldn't have worked for the Olympics because FIFA is taking this space, because FIFA is taking the space in Kamloops and Sun Peaks and Whistler, in Kelowna, in Richmond, and other cities? Or is this strictly, at this point, in a Vancouver, depending on negotiations with the metro area, type of a tax?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And again, the member suggests that this tool for 2030 potential games, Olympic Games, would have, helped with the $2 billion plus price tag of hosting the Olympics. And because there was already a commitment to FIFA, there's not enough runway to actually raise the revenue that would be needed to help offset some of these costs. That doesn't mean it can't happen beyond 2030. Just need more runway. There wasn't enough runway in order to make those a successful games, and that was, was really, the main rationale, given that we know that Olympic Games, and we've done it before in 2010, they cost a lot. It costs a lot here in British Columbia. And we paid for it for a long time. And so we want to be prepared for when we host these international games. And we want them to be good games, want them to be successful games. And so it was with that in mind that we made the decision that we wouldn't pursue a 2030 bid, because the risks were significant, the costs were significant, and we had already made a commitment to FIFA around hosting those games, and the fiscal capacity to generate revenue to help pay for the games that the city needs was already identified, and that this would be the tool. But there wasn't another way to do it for the city of Vancouver, and I appreciate that the member recognizes that other communities would host events for an Olympic Games. That was part of the suggestion. or the idea. But the ability for those communities to raise the revenue that they would need, it's still not enough because Vancouver wouldn't be able to generate the revenue they needed. And there, again, not enough runway. And so right now before us is a tool to help the City of Vancouver generate the revenue it needs to host a successful FIFA games. And I know that Kamloops and other communities will also get in the spirit, hosting all kinds of watch parties, making sure that as much of the province can participate and enjoy the festivities that go with watching a game that the rest of the world really loves.
Member.
Thank you. Well, these questions, though, Madam Chair, are not about whether communities will be watching the World Cup in 2026. I think that's a given. They're already doing it right now, as the minister said. They're also not going to receive any of this money from the MRDT to host those watch parties or anything else. Vancouver's not going to, through this MRDT, suddenly start shipping money off to Kamloops so you can have a big screen up in a town square. That's not what this is designed for. And the minister has said there's simply not enough runway for this to have been an effective use for the Olympics, yet the minister at the beginning of all this said they didn't actually model the MRDT for the Olympic bid and the First Nations bid that was there. And it's not just 4 nations. In Kamloops area, there was another 4 nations that were working through the process of agreeing and consulting with the Vancouver 4 nations around the bid with some peaks and tying in with Kamloops. So in the Sconlith, the Tecumloops, the Simp, the Little Shuswap, we're all in discussions about how this would work and be a benefit to them and their areas as well. So I guess the question around the designated recipients and all of that in the designated major event areas, with the backdrop of UNDRIP and DRIPA, will Indigenous communities have sign-off on whether the MRDT is applied as well within their traditional areas, or is this strictly municipally led requests and approvals?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I first of all want to note that I did not say that no modeling was done. Modeling was done. I think it's important that the member understand that we did do some modeling. It was at a very high level because we only had limited information. And so as a result, we were only able to model what we knew at the time. And we took a look to see sort of, at again, high level, that's how we got to more than $2 billion. It was through modeling. And so that work was undertaken. I think the member needs to, I hope that he understands that and appreciates that. The member's question specifically was if a First Nation wanted to host in their community, what would they have to do? And they would have to work with Canada in order to get the authorities needed in order to have an MRDT.
Noting the hour, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Noting the hour, I move that the committee rise, report progress, and ask leave to sit again.
Members, you've heard the question to rise and report progress and ask leave to sit again. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This committee stands adjourned.